Have you ever spent hours in time trial for one lucky lap that you can't replicate again and which doesn't translate to more pace anyway? Guys, it's time to stop aimlessly grinding time trial. Today I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide to stop grinding endless laps in time trial and start using it as a training tool to get quicker every single time. I'm also going to show you a trick that 99% of people miss. This is not clickbait. You know me better than that. There's nothing wrong with a 4-hour time trial session if you walk away from it a faster driver who understands the car and the track better than before and can translate that knowledge into race pace. But let's be honest, is that what happens for you? What I know from 600 hours of coaching is that most people who have telemetry below top split levels don't benefit from it. It doesn't make them quicker. The problem is that it's lines and graphs, and 99% of people don't see their mistakes, they just see lines and graphs. It's overwhelming. That's not going to change now that telemetry is native to the game. So I'm going to simplify it for you in a step-by-step guide. But this isn't just a telemetry guide, it's a time trial guide. After this video, you're going to be time trialing the exact same way I do. Here's another question. Have you ever watched someone like Digit or a top 10 replay and said to yourself, how are they braking so late? When I brake that late, I miss the corner. They aren't braking as late as you think they are. Your eyes are deceiving you. How do I know? Because not one coaching student knew how to find the correct braking point before coming to see me. Guys, if you do this correctly, you will never need another track guide again. Before you even go on track, we need to know 3 things: breakpoints, lines, gears. Let's go over how you're going to find those. So at the beginning of the week, go into the time trial, pick the fastest guy who's using the same car that you're using, and go into his replay. In this case, we're going to pick Lewis because he's the world record holder. Now, you've probably been told to use replays to find these things before, but as I said, there's a strong possibility you're not doing it right. Safe to say the people that are doing it right are in the minority. So, let's start with breakpoints. Now, notice that I have put the replay into chase camera. I don't drive in chase camera, I drive in bumper cam. But when it comes to finding a breakpoint, you need to put the replay in chase camera. The reason for that is that there is a delay with the brake pedal input in replays. It's a known bug. What this means is you can't trust the brake input on the screen as the indication of where he's braking. You have to use the brake lights, and therefore you have to be behind the car. There are 3 main problems when it comes to judging where someone's braking. Number 1, as I've just explained, there is a delay on the brake pedal input. The second reason is by the time he gets to that braking point, he's doing 150 miles an hour. Factor in your reaction time to visual stimuli at 150 miles an hour, it simply looks like someone is braking later than they actually are. The third reason it looks like they're braking later than they are is humans are not good at judging distance on a 2D screen. We're 3D beings, we live in a 3D world, and you are looking at a 2D screen. It messes with your depth perception. So, in order to find the correct braking point, stop the car roughly before you know they're about to hit the brakes. Confirm that they are still full throttle, that they haven't started braking yet. Move the replay forwards 1 frame at a time until you see the brake lights come on. There we go. Some cars it is difficult to see the brake lights. If you can't see the brake lights properly, clear the screen, look for the ABS light. What you're looking for is for the ABS light and the brake lights to both be on and nothing in the brake pedal. I'm not going to show you in too much detail here, but we would need to move the replay forwards at least one car length before anything shows in that brake pedal input, which is why you can't trust it and cannot use it as an indicator of where they are actually braking. What you can then do is step outside of the car to get a visual confirmation of where they are braking. So we can now see that he is braking at the end of the pit wall and slightly before those vans over there. Now you probably know already that these are the two most common brake markers for this corner, but let me show you how you would find those brake markers. Once you have established where he's actually braking, go into your chosen view. I'm going to use bumper cam because it's what I use, but this works in your views as well. You are then going to scan for a brake marker. Wherever possible, you need to use the edge of your screen and allow something to intersect with the edge of your screen as your braking reference. It can be the left, the right, the top, the bottom. It can even be the mirror. Try not to perceive the distance to a braking point in front of you because your depth perception will be screwed with that. You'll make consistency errors. Now, if you scan the vista in front of us, we really can't see a great deal here, can we? However, we do know that he is right next to that wall and those vans. So if we go backwards a little bit and we look at the left-hand side, we can now use either the tyre pit wall or those vans as braking references. In my case, I use the edge of the pit wall. So watch the red tyres right at the end of the pit wall. And I'm looking for that pit wall to disappear off the edge of my screen, and then I brake. Factor in the fact that you are doing 150 miles an hour and your reaction time to visual stimuli. And that puts us basically there where Lewis hits the brakes. If you find that that particular visual reference, that particular brake marker causes you to brake too late, then you would simply brake earlier in relation to that marker. So rather than letting the pit wall disappear, you would brake just before the end of the pit wall actually does disappear whilst it's still visible on the end of your screen. What you are doing then is compensating for your personal reaction time. This is how you find a braking point. Do this for every single corner. Let's talk about racing lines. Go back again to this view. Why? Because we can see the whole car. Let's watch the racing line through turn 1 and 2. What did you notice? You're probably saying, well, he just took the racing line, Luke. No, look closer. Because again, coaching students don't come into me already taking the right lines. If they did, they wouldn't need me. So let's look closer. He's on this curb a lot. Where is he? Is he on the left-hand side of the track? Is he in the middle of the track? Is he on the right-hand side of the track? Don't underestimate how important this is. Without the right line, you won't get enough rotation and you'll have a hard time getting on the throttle, especially in corners like this. He's on the right-hand side of the track. And notice that he does not try to turn left before turning right. These are details that coaching students are not picking up on without me showing them. So there is a strong chance that you aren't picking up on the right racing line either. What else do you notice? Is he on the track or is he on the curb? and how much of the curb is he using. The wheels are on the yellow part of the curb. This is crucial. Again, you will not get enough rotation and you will struggle to get the power down if you don't use this line and this much track. Once again, do this for every corner. I'll show you one more. Take note of where he is. Look at how wide he is going in. Look at the track limits. Are you going on the curb here, or are you staying on the track? Where is he? Is he on the left? Is he in the middle? Is he on the right? I really don't mean to make it sound this obvious, but this is just 600 hours of coaching experience. Most people are running out way too wide here, and what that does is compromise their line into that right-hander and ruin their exit down that long straight. He's on the left-hand side. Do this for every corner. Figure out the racing lines. Then we need gears. For that, all you need to do is let the replay run. Let's go through this first sector together. So he goes down to first gear, up to second, down to first again. Second and third, second, first, double shift up to third. Take note of it. Write it down if you need to. And one word of caution. It is very common that lower ranked drivers try to use the same gears but linger in the lower gear for too long, thereby slowing the car down too much. You may think you're using the same gears, but the difference is that a top driver uses that gear merely to rotate the car and then shifts back up to the higher gear before they lose too much momentum. Rather than thinking about it as a first gear corner where you exit in second or a second gear corner where you exit in third, think of it as a second gear corner where you briefly hack more rotation with first gear, or a third gear corner where you briefly hack more rotation with second gear. I did explain this in my recent 6 tips videos. Go check it out if you need to. So now we know what breakpoints to use, what lines to use, and what gears to use. This 20 minutes of prep has just saved you a couple of hours on track trying to figure it out yourself. And I would wager we have also enlightened you when it comes to breakpoints and racing lines. There are several schools of thought about how to use a ghost. The most common one you'll be told is to set it at 3/10. I'm not here to tell you that's wrong. I am here to offer you an alternative if you can manage it. The problem with setting the ghost at 3/10 is that by the time that ghost is at the end of the sector, it's too far away to be of any benefit. Sound familiar? By setting the ghost at 0.1 or even 0.0, you stay closer to the ghost for longer and it becomes more beneficial for more corners. The trick here is to look through the ghost, not at it. It's not true that setting the ghost this close is a distraction for everyone. That's subjective. I know several top split guys and numerous students who do this. If you can get used to it, you will find you can more easily copy what the ghost is doing. I did a video on this before and numerous people commented saying it instantly made them faster. Give it a try, be patient with it before you dismiss it. It works for more people than you might think. Regardless of where you set the ghost, make sure to use the ghost on sector reset in the settings. Stay on track, keep lapping until you hit your natural skill wall. When you know going faster is going to be one lucky lap that you can't replicate again, it's time to stop lapping. It's time for the next stage. A word of caution here. Be aware of retrying mid-lap because you spun or got a penalty. If you keep resetting every time you make a mistake, you will become less experienced in the last sector or two of that lap and hence slower in the last part of the lap. You need equal time on all sectors and all corners. I beg of you, please don't dismiss this one. If it held me back, it will 100% hold you back. Once you've hit your natural skill ceiling, rather than grinding more laps hoping to nail that one lucky lap that can't be replicated again, what you need to do is use the game's existing features to find your mistakes and fix them. I'm going to show you using telemetry, but also I'm going to show you why replays are still very, very relevant for lower ranked drivers. Telemetry is the single best tool for improvement, yes. But for lower ranked drivers, replays have a visual impact on the uneducated eye that you don't get from telemetry until you know what you're looking at. So for most of you, combining the two is the best way forward. I'm going to compare two students to myself on two different corners, and you'll see what I mean. So I am in blue here, and the subject student Paul is in yellow, and we are looking at the last corner at Lago Maggiore in Group 3 in the M6. So what I would recommend you do as lower ranked drivers is select brake and throttle. There are a lot of other parameters you can pick, but brake and throttle are the two most important ones. So entering the final corner, you can see that Paul is 2.5 seconds down on me, and the entry speed into the corner is basically 1 mile an hour less. Now this is to be expected because, again, if we look over here at the track map, Paul will not have carried as much speed out of the previous corner as me, so he's going to be going slower than me entering the corner. But if we look at the brake trace here, again, blue is me, yellow is Paul, and you can see that he brakes harder than I do. Now, it's not by a lot, okay? It's not by a lot, but he does brake harder than I do. Otherwise, he trail brakes out quite nicely. He actually arguably trail brakes out better than I do. I've just changed my brake pedal configuration for the first time in a long time, just experimenting with something new, trying to get used to it. So what we can see here is actually his trail braking is pretty good. He just brakes harder than me going in. Now, what does this do to the gap? So 2.530 going in at the moment just before hitting the brakes. And at the point of releasing the brakes, so there we've both released the brakes, and the gap is 2.58. So only about half a tenth loss on the brakes. That's very respectable because Paul is a high C, low B rank driver. So on the braking itself, to only lose half a tenth to me in this corner is astonishing, right? And then look at the throttle trace down here. So I actually feed the throttle in a little bit and then floor it. He waits, coasts for a bit, and then floors it aggressively. Again, that's okay, that works. And the gap is actually 2.6, so it's barely a tenth. Why is it then, if the brake and the throttle look that good, watch the gap up there as we exit the corner. Why does it go from 2.530? Why is there a 2/10 loss? What's happening? How can there be a 2/10 loss when the braking only lost half a tenth and when the throttle seemingly loses nothing? What happens? Well, let's go to the overhead view. And this is my car overlaid over Paul's car heading into the final corner. So let's see what happens. So the sawtooth line, that's where you're braking. A solid line is throttle. And then the dotted line is coasting. So, okay, so he brakes a little earlier than me. Again, not unexpected. Lower ranked driver will be a little bit more cautious. But, you know, it's not a major time loss. I'm fine with it for his level. I think it's a perfectly good braking point. Okay, so I turn in before him. I turn in quite a lot before him. Right, so now we see the answer. Now we see that I'm using a lot more track on the inside. But here's the question. Do you guys know what this actually means you need to do? Can you visualize what this actually means you need to do? A top 100 driver knows instantly what this means, but a lower ranked driver, why is it that me using a little bit more track here results in that gap just getting bigger and bigger on the exit? Now, if you're anywhere below A, and even if you're in A rank, pay attention to this, because I guarantee you make a 10th in this corner because of this. This track limits looks okay. He's got wheels on the curb, just about. I'm sure most of you are thinking, well, he could use a bit more curb. Maybe that's the problem. Use a bit more curb, get a bit more rotation. Remember, we've established the braking isn't that bad. Paul's a high C, low B rank driver. The braking and the throttle work were actually pretty good. So where's the problem? Where has he lost the time? Do you see the difference? Now, here's my question to you. Would you have guessed from the telemetry that this is what you had to do? I'm sure you would have guessed from the telemetry, use more curb. Yes, I'm sure you would have guessed that. But would you have guessed that this is what the telemetry actually wanted you to do? Would you have guessed from the telemetry that it actually wants you to go over the grass here in order to get that line? Or would you have naturally tried to avoid the grass and still get the same line, which would never have worked, by the way? It's not possible to take that line. So if Paul brakes at exactly the same place that he did, exactly the same way that he did, coasts and throttles, and does everything exactly the same way that he did, all he had to do was turn into the corner earlier. Simple as that. Use what feels like unnatural track limits, and he would have made a 10th on the exit. He would have lost only 1/10 to me in this corner instead of 2/10 to me in this corner. So let's do another one. And this time we're looking at turn 1 and 2. Looking at turn 1, and this brake trace for a B rank driver on a controller who finds a controller difficult. Again, perfectly happy with that brake trace. We're not going to critique that too hard. It's not the major time loss. At the point that we have both released the brakes, the gap has increased by a 10th. So he's now lost a 10th on the brakes. Again, perfectly acceptable at this level. It's not the major time loss. I carry more speed through the corner and I get on the throttle earlier exiting the corner. He waits a bit and presses the throttle harder. The technique works because actually by the time we're about to brake for the next corner, turn 2, the gap is the same. And this brake trace looks really good, doesn't it? I mean, that is extremely close to mine. So where's the time loss? So as we get off the brakes, so we both get off the brakes and we both coast before we get on the throttle. So again, Alex has paid attention to his coaching. He's actually closed the gap up a little bit. It's actually brought back 0.5. So I'm then on the throttle earlier, but he reaches 100% throttle earlier than me. So I throttle earlier and get to 100% throttle later. He throttles later and gets to 100% throttle earlier. So where's the time loss then? Because basically at the moment through turns 1 and 2, it looks like he's lost a 10th. That would be very acceptable for a B rank driver, wouldn't it? Watch that delta. So this is just a short piece of straight exiting turn 2, and I'm going to stop it before we turn into turn 3. There we go. That's about it. Any further and we're talking about turn 3 territory. 10.5 on the exit of turn 2. Where did that come from? Same as Paul. Where did that come from? Because to all intents and purposes, these brake and throttle traces look great for a B rank driver. So once again, let's go to the overhead view. So heading into the turn, I do brake a little later. And this shows you how much later it actually is, because I actually pull away from him on the brakes. Again, I don't think the graphs really drive that home to most people. And I carry more speed through the corner and I use a little bit more track. But again, this is perfectly acceptable time loss between, a top 50 driver and a B rank driver. We're not going to critique it too hard. So he gets on the brakes, releases them a little bit earlier than me. The line looks good though, he's turned in. The line doesn't look that bad, but then do you see how his car edges wider of mine? And then mine keeps rotating and his doesn't. And then what happens on the exit is I just pull away. So, what's the problem? Can you tell from telemetry what the problem is? Once again, it's not that telemetry isn't telling you the answer. It's that it takes an educated eye to see it. How do you educate your eye to see it? Replays. So this is Alex's replay. Let's have a look and see if we can find the problem. So, doesn't use the curb there, like I showed you at the beginning of the video. But it's not a significant time loss here. And he even stays on the right-hand side. Once again, he has paid attention to his coaching and he has paid attention to the racing lines of the Ghosts. But B-rank drivers don't get everything right. If they did, they wouldn't be B-rank drivers anymore. Looks good, right? Where's the problem? Do you remember what I told you about that yellow strip? Again, look at where the car is. On telemetry, it looks like it's only slightly less rotated than mine. Now what you realize is look where he's pointing. How can you get the throttle down where he's pointing? Now, once again, a low rank driver would look at this and go, but that's fine track limits, isn't it? What's wrong with that? Well, let's go and look at my replay. Again, look at the difference. What happens is he simply doesn't abuse the track limits here. And as a result, he has to keep turning on the exit while getting the throttle down. Whereas I can unwind the steering whilst getting the throttle down simply because I turned in and used more track. All right, bonus one. Let's do one more. So we're back with Paul and we're doing the third from last corner, which is actually the penultimate braking zone. So straight away, we can see here that Paul's yellow brake trace, he brakes too hard and he brakes too late. We can see that, right? Now, obviously that causes time loss. You probably don't need me to explain that. What I want you to pay attention to, though, is the brake release. So I'm going to move the red line right up to the point where Paul releases the brake. Now, something I've mentioned in videos before. Have you ever chased a top 10 Ghost and you feel like you're with them in the braking zone and then they vanish on the exit? I don't need to ask the question. I know you have, and you're thinking, yeah, it happens to me all the time. That happens because you are very often on the brake when the guy you're chasing is actually on the throttle. I'm convinced maybe some of you guys watching don't actually believe me. Look at the screen. I have stopped the red line exactly where Paul releases the brake. Look down to the throttle trace. That's my throttle. I actually started throttling. If I can get it in the right place, there we go. I actually started throttling when he was still at 30% on the brake. What happens here is by letting go of the brake earlier and using a little bit of maintenance throttle, I carry more speed through the corner. But the key is the brake release point. Now, I don't think for the uneducated eye that this picture here of these two brake traces tells the full story. It does for the educated eye, but not for the uneducated eye. So let me show you from a replay the difference between our two brake release points. And before we go there, this is what I want you to take on board. The fact that I brake earlier and release the brake earlier is exactly what allows me to carry maintenance throttle and therefore carry more speed through the corner. So we're back in Paul's replay, and this is the exact frame in the video where he's released the brake. So this looks okay, right? I mean, the telemetry doesn't tell you where to release the brake. It just tells you need to brake earlier and release the brake earlier. So how do you translate that to what you actually do on the track? Because if I show this to the general masses, your everyday lower range driver, what's wrong with that? That looks fine, right? Well, let's find out. I want you to take a mental photograph of where his car is. So as a general reference, let's look at it from this point of view. The car is more or less in line with that yellow square behind Paul. The back of the car is just about fully turned into the corner. Front of the car, there we go, in line with that wall. Let's look at it from this point of view. He's about roughly in line with the 2 trees on the right. We've got 3 trees and he's in line with 2 of them. So let's go and look at my brake release point. Okay, so this is my replay. Once again, this is the exact frame in the video where I've released the brake. You can already see it, right? You don't even need me to give you a visual reference. But let's align the camera with where Paul's car was. So Paul's brake release was basically here. His car was there. There's mine. That's where I have released the brake. Answer me one question. Put it in the comments for me. Did you comprehend from the brake trace in the telemetry just how much earlier I am braking and releasing compared to Paul? In the telemetry, it looks like a tiny little bit. Even when you go above the cars and you look at it from bird's eye view to look at the racing lines, it doesn't look this dramatic. Again, to the educated eye, they know this. They see this in their mind's eye just from looking at the telemetry. The average lower rank driver, they don't. And that is precisely why I said at the beginning of this video that all students, in fact, that have come to me over 600 hours who already had telemetry prior to seeing me didn't really improve from it. And this is why, because they're not able to actually read what the telemetry is telling them. Replays in that sense are a lot more impactful. So let's talk about how you go forwards. Now that you know how to find your mistakes, let's simplify even more on what you're going to do. In the last coaching video, I repeatedly stressed the importance of using replays and telemetry to find out what you are actually doing wrong, not what you think you're doing. Do you see why now? We now have telemetry in-game and the already existing excellent replay feature. I know from coaching though that these can be overwhelming. No student was effectively using replays before coming to see me, so that won't change with telemetry. It's information overload and you don't know where to start, let alone understand what you're actually looking at. I've been there and I see it every week with students. That's why I'm going to simplify it all for you right now. Start with the time trial prep. Find your breakpoints, lines and gears. You waste hours of effort and progress not doing this, or perhaps more likely, not doing it properly. Then go on track and push for a fast lap. Stop the moment you know you are going to have a really hard time beating your current personal best. Then go into the telemetry and find your mistakes. Corroborate what you find with replays on the same corner, both the top 10 replay and your replay. One corner, one mistake. Don't overanalyze and don't get analysis paralysis. There's a great temptation to analyze the whole lap and try to fix everything at once. Don't. As I demonstrated in the last video, you want targeted, focused, methodical training. Pick one corner. Don't even look at a second corner until you have fixed the first one. And by fixed, I mean found time on track. Find one thing to fix in that corner. If there are multiple things to fix, start with just one, like those examples I just showed you. Alex and Paul had multiple reasons for their time loss in those corners, but I isolated it down to one primary thing for all three examples: the lowest hanging fruit. Turn in earlier for the first example, use more track for the second example, and brake earlier so that you can release the brake earlier for the third. Once you have identified your mistake, go back on track, focus on applying your one fix to your one corner. Rinse and repeat. By doing it this way, you're avoiding overload from trying to fix more than one thing at a time, and you are simultaneously teaching yourself how to drive fast and learning how much one single thing can change everything. You're taking the complex task of learning to drive fast and breaking it down into bite-sized chunks, which over time will lay a foundation for becoming a much stronger driver. The more you do this, the more you will learn, and eventually you will be able to handle fixing more than one thing at a time. Your comprehension of what it takes to be a fast driver will improve as the veil slowly gets lifted from your eyes. You're basically self-coaching, and if you need further help, you know where I am. Drive smarter, not harder. Thanks for listening, guys. Now get out of here and go race.